Welcome back to Court TV Live, your front row seat to justice. I'm Julie Grant, and this is your daily sidebar. I have my Court TV colleagues with me. I'm joined by Court TV anchor Ted Rowlands, Court TV legal correspondent Julia Janae, and our guest host, Judge Ashley Wilcott. Great to see you all. Let's dig in, shall we? We saw forensic evidence testimony today. We saw the GSR residue coming in as a big link in this case, and the tire track evidence. And so I want to play just a brief clip from the cross-examination of the state's expert witness who says that there is a close match. You can't definitively say with 100% certainty between the defendant's tire and what was left at the scene. Let's watch, and then I'll get your take on the other side.
Is there any required percentage of identifiable characteristics required to make an identification?
No.
Is there any known margin of error in this field?
Like an error rate?
Yes, error rate, margin of error, match probability, reliance however you want to say it.
So there's no standard within the forensic science fields of error rates being tabulated. So no forensic science discipline has or the field in general, all of the fields of forensic science does not have a single way to establish error rates. Error rates can be established by different ways. One of the ways is through like proficiency testing that I explained before. And proficiency testing, you can tabulate an error rate from the proficiency tests.
Well, you can tabulate the error rates on the tests, yeah. I'm saying in your field, in practice, what's the margin of error when somebody makes an identification based on subjective criteria that a particular tire made a particular imprint?
There is no error rate that can be established because the ground truth is not known at that particular time.
All right. So in my opinion, this was the best advocacy we've seen from defense counsel so far in this case. I want to get your thoughts. Let's go around the horn now, shall we? Ted Rowlands, let me begin with you, please.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was good cross-examination. This was an expert who didn't have his expertise completely buttoned up, and I think that's partly because the science isn't completely buttoned up, and the defense did a good job of exposing that as a valid science in a courtroom. It has some obvious holes.
Yeah, no, most definitely. He went right in there, and there were points where I kind of felt bad for the witness. Judge, did you? I mean, it was like it was getting really uncomfortable. He was really getting beat up there on the stand, and and what a shame, because I know that the state really wanted to hang its hat on his testimony. Your thoughts, if you would, please.
I agree with you, Julie. I think he was getting beat up. But listen, that's the job of the defense attorney, because the reality is, if you are going to be testifying as an expert and you've been prepared in terms of these are the questions we're going to ask you as an expert, you better darn be prepared to be able to say what you've relied on, what articles, what different pieces of information, who wrote them, who they're by. If you can't recall, you can ask to refer to your notes. But I mean, Julie, those are critical pieces of information. The defense did a really good job at exposing those pieces were not known and therefore affect the credibility of the witness.
Yeah, great points, Judge. Julia Janae, last but certainly not least, your thoughts on the tire expert and in particular on the cross.
Well, Julie, we knew that the defense already objected to this kind of evidence. They tried to get it excluded in the pretrial litigation, and they were not successful in doing that. So this is their recourse in court. They're able to hash out those issues that they have with this testimony in front of the jury. And the prosecution tried to bring out that this expert, Jason Crafton, has only 2 or 3 times come into court to say yes. Of all the tire analysis that he's done, it's only been 3 times that he's been certain that he had a match. But I think that actually, if the jury looks at it a different way, it could show that it is very difficult to match tires. And perhaps even in this situation, the defense was really effective in drawing out that it's hard to explain it objectively to the next person.
Yeah, defense counsel did a fine job with that cross-examination. I had hoped the state would call another witness to sort of end on a higher note, but they didn't. We know that we're going to be in closings tomorrow on this one. So, at Court TV, one thing I love that we do is, we call balls and strikes. We call it like we see it. And with this defense attorney today, I'm praising him for a fine job. I felt like he really shined crossing that tire expert. But yesterday, I was not praising him. I was losing my mind when I was watching what was such a mess. It was an improper impeachment that happened in the courtroom with the defendant's wife, Melanie Addie. And Judge Ashley, you and I were changing seats here at the anchor desk. We talked a little bit about it off camera, both scratching our heads at what happened. And it's definitely worth a replay and worth some discussion. Let's take a look at that clip now.
You've testified in this matter before, correct?
Yes.
And you were specifically asked about where Jim kept his guns, correct?
Yes.
And if there was anything, any information, anything that was important to this case that the lawyers needed to know, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So, sorry, here's your depo. Here's a transcript of that deposition. Could you please point out where you tell people that a gun went missing?
Do you want me to look through the whole thing?
Well, surely it's in there, correct?
I don't know. I don't remember.
You don't know if you testified in the past about a gun that went missing?
I remember they asked questions about the guns.
Right.
I don't know what you're asking specifically.
What I'm asking is, when you were specifically asked questions about his guns in the past, I'd like to know where the answer that correlates with this missing gun is in that transcript.
It wasn't there.
So you didn't discuss it then?
I don't remember.
I'm not seeing a question where she was asked about that specifically.
Can't give an answer to a question. I'm sorry. I said she can't give an answer to a question she wasn't asked.
Oh my gosh. Okay, where do I even begin with this? Finally, the state woke up and said improper impeachment. That was so improper from the outset. Judge Ashley, I want to go to you on this one because you teach trial advocacy as well. You know what a proper impeachment looks like. That was a mess, was it not?
And it's one of those things where you watch it and you just want to step in and say, wait, let's
Right.
go back and try to do it textbook, right?
Right.
And the textbook is, as you well know, Julie, you want to get your witness to commit. So when you go up to cross-examine, for instance, you say, you want the jury to believe, as you just testified, that the stoplight is red. Yes. And then you credit. You remember giving a deposition a year ago and I asked you questions and you signed under oath. And here on page 32, line 10, read this for me if you would. Or do you recall stating the light was green? And if they say, yes, the light was green, there you've done it. You've impeached them. And if they say no, or if they don't answer, then you say, read this out loud for me if you would. The light was green. It can be very straightforward.
Yes, yes. Judge, A+, as always for you. This was, it was just so appalling to me because you don't walk up to a witness, hand them their deposition and say, find in there where you said this. And then I was so mad, Ted, I was so mad at those prosecutors for not protecting their witness. You have the wife who's been through so much heartache, and then she's up there just, flailing, like, what do I do? Do I look through this? And they're all just sitting there. Oh, your thoughts, Ted?
Yeah, I was very uncomfortable because she had no idea what he was talking about. Like, she's literally like, you want me to read this whole thing? And she was gonna, but it was, obviously we understood what he was trying to do, and he just didn't do it. He wasn't thinking about what her position is, who she is. To attack someone like this, first of all, is very gutsy, and it could backfire, which it did. And then to your point, she should have been saved way before she was. There should have been an objection out of the gate because he was so confrontational with her. And after what? It was a point he should have made and just had her answer yes or no. He needed to articulate. I believe that she not only didn't understand what was going on, I can't imagine that the jury really got his point. And that is a huge problem because his point is a valid one. She was interviewed before and never mentioned a missing gun. Isn't it true? Yes. We never got there.
You're absolutely right, Ted. It kind of went over like a lead balloon, a messy lead balloon. That was awful. And I love what you said about, you want to pick who you cross hard in a courtroom, right? You don't, come after the woman who's the ex-wife, been through so much turmoil, and giving testimony like this. I mean, her life was changed forever with these awful circumstances, just like Molly Watson's family's lives were changed forever. And she's the one he picks to go after for an omission that probably wasn't her fault because maybe she was never asked the question. Okay, Julia, tell me what you thought about this. Were you as upset as I was as you were watching this? I think you were upstairs in our Court TV studio when you were seeing this improper impeachment, I would say, unfold.
It was confusing. That's what I was left with. Not sure what he was trying to pull out of her, whether she said the statement, whether it was in the deposition and was being said on the stand. But ultimately, we just saw a different style from TJ Kirsch because all of his other cross-examination up until that point had been very pointed, very narrow. It was very clear what point he was trying to make because he usually only asked a couple of questions, maybe 3 of the witness. So to decide in this instance for the ex-wife of the defendant, someone that is a sympathetic person on the stand in this jury of 9 women and 6 men, I think that was a bold move and likely a misstep in trying to garner any favor with this jury.
Yeah, that's right. Balls and strikes, that's how we call it, He threw some strikes today for sure with the cross-examination, but yesterday that was a big gaffe. I want to play a little clip of some of the testimony from the witness who talked about being the one to issue the marriage license for Molly Watson and defendant James Addie.
Good afternoon, sir. Briefly, the state's last exhibit said at the top, must be returned within, but then it kind of cut off. Is there a time frame you have to get that return done?
For it to be returned after they've got married, or?
Yes, sir.
Well, it's supposed to be returned no matter what, even if they don't get married. But if they get married, they should have it back to me within the next 30 days.
Right, and can somebody request an extension of that time frame from you?
I've never had anybody ask that before.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right, our producers chose this clip to play because it was just an example of a very short cross-examination by defense counsel. This was, we believe, the shortest one of this trial, just a few questions in and out, that's it. But really, he's been brief with most of these witnesses. Judge, what do you think of that? Do you think counsel should be doing more? What do you think about his a little technique here he's been implementing?
Sure. Well, I think that, to be very brief on cross is the point. You don't want to ask about everything or rehash. That's not appropriate. You need to draw your points in whatever amount of time it requires. But on that particular clip, I love the producers picked that because the reality in that clip is it leaves me confused. Why is he asking that question about an extension with that kind of answer? Oh, nobody's ever asked me that, A. And B, you don't ask the question that you don't know the answer to because it ends up like that, which was what is the point of that cross-examination?
Appreciate it, Judge. Ted, before we have to go to break, we know the defense has no burden. I know you know that. Do you think there should have been some evidence presented, though, in this case?
This is a tough one for the defense. Let's face it. You play the cards you've been dealt, and if they didn't feel that their pathological lying defendant could get up there and get through across, which I totally agree with, I don't know where you go. You bring in a tire expert. You already did a great job, I think, with the cross on that. You bring in an expert, you're going to actually solidify the science a little bit, I think, when the state crosses your expert. So I don't know what they could have done.
Yeah, maybe nothing. Julia, quick thoughts on that. Do you think they could or should have done any more?
They left on a big question mark with that cross-examination of the tire expert. I don't think there could have been a better witness for them to leave it as almost undetermined as far as that big piece of evidence for the state.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. For the defense, it was a good way to send the jury off in preparation for closing arguments tomorrow. For the state, not so much. Julia, Janae, Ted Rollins, Judge Ashley Wilcott, thank you all so much. That is it for our daily sidebar. Today, we're going to step aside for a break. When we come back, we're going to dig into more of this critical testimony in this case, as both sides are probably preparing right now to deliver their closing arguments to the jury tomorrow morning. We'll be there for all of it. This is Court TV Live, your front row seat to justice.